The town was small enough that most people knew each other's dogs by name. In winter, the streets looked tidy but tired. Store windows kept their lights on a little longer to make up for the early dark. The air had that thin, cold bite that turned every breath into a little cloud. Most days, the sheriff's office stood as a steady place, warm, well-swept and calm, where folks dropped off lost scarves, asked about road salt, or left flyers for bake sales and choir nights. It was also the place where people came when they did not know where else to go. Sheriff Tom Hadley believed in quiet order. He arrived before the sun, set his cup of coffee down on the same ring on his desk, and checked on the day's calls. He liked rules because rules were clear, and clear things helped people feel safe. He had a gentle way of speaking that made most visitors relax. A photo of his late wife sat on the corner of his desk. He never spoke about her at work, but sometimes his eyes rested on that photo for a breath too long. Even the deputies noticed it, though they never said anything. On that cold morning, the door opened and a woman stepped inside, rubbing her hands for warmth. She was not old, but her face showed a long week. A wool hat sat low on her brow, and her coat was one of those that had done its duty for many winters. She paused near the lobby's bulletin board as if to gather her courage. Then she took a few steps to the counter where the receptionist sat. Mara Alvarez told herself to speak slowly and clearly, but her heart was beating fast. She had tried the food bank yesterday and learned that the shelves would be filled again next week. Next week felt far away when the kitchen felt empty now. She had already stretched beans and rice into thin soups, and she had cut every corner she could. She had children. She had an elderly neighbor who counted on her. She believed in dignity. She had always tried to give before she asked to receive, but today she needed help. When the receptionist asked how she could help, the words spilled out all at once. "I will end your loneliness if you give us food, please," she said. The sentence came out in a rush, too fast, like a note slid under a door. The receptionist blinked. One deputy looked up from his chair. The sheriff, on his way to the lobby, paused in the doorway, surprised by the sound of the woman's voice and the way the sentence landed. For a second, the room felt uncertain. It was not a usual request. It was not a usual sentence. The deputy frowned. The receptionist's cheeks grew pink. The sheriff stepped forward and introduced himself, steady and respectful, and asked the woman if she would like to sit down. She nodded, grateful for a chair and the chance to fix her breath. He offered her a paper cup of water from the cooler. She accepted, hands shaking only a little. "I did not say that well," she said. "I am sorry. My name is Mara. I do not want trouble. I want to help, and I also need help." "Tell me what you mean," the sheriff said. His voice was even. He sat across from her, not behind a desk, not looming over her. They were two people at the same level, sharing a small table that had a vase with plastic flowers in it. Mara explained in simple words. During the pandemic, she had become a caregiver. At first, she helped a neighbor by making a call every morning just to ask, "How are you?" That neighbor lived alone. She had no family close by. Sometimes she did not speak to another person for days. One small check-in made her smile. Then Mara called another person and another. Soon she had a little list of seniors who liked to hear a friendly voice each day. It cost nothing but time, and it gave something warm and human. She pulled out her phone and showed the sheriff her list. It was tidy and careful. Names, ages, phone numbers, notes about mobility, notes about small worries, likes to hear about birds, uses a walker, granddaughter visits on Sundays, drops sugar in tea, prefers 2 cookies. In another column, she had marked days when someone did not answer, and how many times she tried back. If she could not reach them, she would text a neighbor or once or twice call the non-emergency line to ask for a wellness check. She never wanted to be a problem, but she wanted the seniors to be safe. Then she told him about the present problem. The factory in the next county had cut shifts. Her hours as a private caregiver had been reduced. She was doing odd cleaning jobs and picking up small tasks for a local clinic when they needed an extra hand, but it was not steady. She had 2 children who were brave and good. They did their homework at the library and helped sweep their building's hallway. She also checked in on an elderly neighbor. She did not want a miracle. She wanted food for a few days, a small bridge to cross this gap. In return, she wanted to offer something of value, not a one-time thanks, but a service for the town. She said slowly this time that she could end your loneliness, meaning the loneliness of the seniors, which she knew weighed on the sheriff's staff as well. She knew the deputies worried about people who lived alone. She knew they could not do it all. The sheriff listened. He rubbed his thumb along the rim of his coffee cup. He glanced at the bulletin board where old flyers hung. A poster for a canned goods drive last fall. A notice about flu shots, a sign that read, "Neighbors check on neighbors." He thought of the calls that came into the office at odd hours. The ones that did not fit cleanly into a rule. A neighbor had not been seen in 2 days. A porch light that stayed on too long. A mailbox full. Those calls were not crimes. They were signs of quiet need. He could see that the deputies were on edge, unsure whether to step in. He gave them a small nod that said, "It is all right." He asked Mara to tell him more about how she started the list, how she kept it safe, and what it looked like on a normal day. She told him that each morning after walking her children to school, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and made her calls. She kept her voice warm but not loud. She used simple questions. "How is your sleep? Did you drink water? Is the heater working?" If someone sounded low, she asked if they wanted to hear a small story about her day. Sometimes she would read a short poem from the library's newsletter. If someone did not pick up the phone 2 days in a row, she rang their neighbor whom she had met during porch chats. If that did not work, she called the clinic or the non-emergency number. She kept careful notes, always respectful, never pushing. She had a gift for listening without making the other person feel small. As she spoke, the sheriff's expression softened. The word she had used, loneliness, settled in the room like a true thing. He knew that feeling in his own way. Since his wife's passing, the house had been quiet. He had learned how to fill a plate for one and place it on a table set for one. He did not speak of that at work, but it was not a secret to himself. He also knew the town. He knew how many porches held a single chair. He knew there were places where silence felt heavy. "What did you do before the calls?" he asked. "I took care of people," she said. "I cleaned, I cooked, I sat with them while they watched shows. I listened to stories I already knew by heart. I liked making sure someone had a warm meal and a little company. When the jobs got smaller, I kept the calls going because the calls cost nothing. But time is not free when the pantry is empty." "How many people do you call now?" he asked. 37, she said. And when she saw his eyebrows rise, she smiled a little. "Not every day. Some just once a week, some every other day. I do what I can. If there were more people on the list, I could schedule a group of volunteers to help. I already have 3 friends who want to do it. We can make a plan. We can log the calls so we do not forget anyone." She opened her notebook and showed him a simple chart she had drawn with a ruler. There were rows for each name and columns for each day. Next to some names, she had tiny stars that meant check feet or ask about pills. She did not pretend to be a nurse. She did not give advice she was not trained to give. She only asked questions that helped people feel seen and safe. When someone needed real help, she connected them to the clinic or the church group that delivered meals once a week. The sheriff asked if he could hold the notebook for a moment. He ran his finger down a page and saw how steady the lines were, how clear the dates, how calm the handwriting. He thought about the way calls like these could take worry off his staff. He thought about winter storms when roads closed fast. A phone tree could save time and maybe more than time. He felt something inside him shift from doubt to interest. Outside, a car door shut. A wind chime on the corner store sang a thin little song. The receptionist slid a small bowl of wrapped candies toward the table, and Mara took one. She said thank you. She looked less shaky now, as if the telling itself had warmed her. "Have you asked for help before?" the sheriff said. "Only from the food bank," she said. "They help when they can. I am grateful. I do not like to come in here and ask like this. I wanted to bring something too. I wanted to bring a way to make things better. What you brought is not small," the sheriff said. "It is organized care. It is attention." The sheriff went back to his office and shut the door with a soft click. He stood by the window for a moment, watching a pale sun try to warm the icy street. Then he picked up the phone. He did not waste time. He called the first grocery manager he knew, a man who had been kind during storm seasons. The sheriff asked a careful question. Did the store have any boxes with food that was safe but close to the date? Food that could go to families right away if they had a simple note from the sheriff's office? The manager sighed, then said he could put together a few boxes by noon if the sheriff could work out the paperwork. It was not a promise of always, but it was a start for today. Next, the sheriff called the church office. The church ran a small emergency fund. The secretary picked up on the second ring just as he hoped. He explained that he had a family with children who needed help today, and he also had a plan to build a call network for people who lived alone. The secretary listened with interest. She said the pastor would be happy to write a voucher for basic groceries as long as the family could pick it up that afternoon. The sheriff thanked her and felt the map in his mind grow clearer. He called the clinic nurse, who always kept a calm head. He asked whether the clinic could advise on a safe and simple checklist for daily calls. Nothing complex, just a one-page sheet to guide volunteers. Check on water, heat, mood, and any signs that someone might need a visit. The nurse said she could help. She even had a short list from a winter health workshop that would fit this purpose. She could email it before lunch. With those calls made, the sheriff felt ready to step back into the lobby. He found Mara where he had left her, near the heater, writing on the notepad in neat lines. She looked up with gentle hope in her eyes. He told her about the grocery boxes and the voucher. He explained that he could not hand out any food from evidence storage or from any other county source without proper orders, but he could connect her to help right now. He also told her that the grocery manager wanted to help again if this effort became a steady plan. Her shoulders eased. She covered her mouth for a second, not to hide tears, but to hold in a sound of relief. Then he showed her the outline of the next steps. If she was willing, he wanted to set up her call list as a formal community volunteer project under the sheriff's community liaison, who handled safety fairs and school talks. This would not be a big, heavy program with complex forms. It would be a simple structure, a name, a short guide, a log sheet, and a friendly check-in schedule. He suggested the name Lonely No More because it was plain and true. The sheriff would ask the liaison to create a simple sign-up form and a one-page training. The clinic would give the health checklist. The office would keep a red folder where volunteers could report any serious worry right away. It would all be done in a way that protected privacy and dignity. Mara nodded again and again. She said she had 3 volunteers ready to start calling within 2 days. She could train them herself with the guide and the log. She could meet the liaison to review the plan and make sure they kept it safe and kind. She could also find 2 more volunteers by the end of the week. The sheriff believed her. You could hear the shape of truth in the way she spoke. Before the day moved on, the sheriff took one more step. He called the county supervisor's office to give a quick notice of the plan. He wanted no surprises. He explained the idea in plain words, a public-private effort to help reduce isolation and to bring early reports of need, with no money handed out by the sheriff's office, and with all donations tracked by the food bank and churches. He hoped for a simple thank you. What he got was a cautious voice asking about rules, risk, and the look of it. The supervisor did not like the story of a woman asking the sheriff for food. The supervisor worried it would sound like a trade. The sheriff kept his own voice calm. He said, "No trade was made, we are building a bridge. You bring care, we bring structure." The call ended without full agreement. The sheriff knew then that he would need to show the plan to the public with clear steps and honest words. That afternoon, he walked with Mara to the church office to pick up the grocery voucher. The pastor met them at the door and smiled with the kind of smile that puts a person at ease. He signed the voucher and added a bag with bread and apples, just because. The sheriff carried the bag to the car without making a show of it. He handed it to Mara, who said thank you in a voice that was both small and bright. From there, the sheriff drove them to the grocery store, where the manager had put together 2 boxes, rice, pasta, canned vegetables, oats, and a few small extras, including a box of tea. The manager nodded to the sheriff and said, "If this works, we can set a regular day." The sheriff said he would be in touch. Back at the office, the community liaison, a cheerful woman named Renee, joined them at the small table. She had a knack for turning big ideas into easy steps. She listened to Mara describe the list, the rhythm of the calls, and the way to flag a worry. She asked smart, kind questions. In less than an hour, they had a draft of the volunteer guide and the log sheet. The clinic nurse emailed the one-page health check, and Renee added it to the packet. They made a simple promise. If a volunteer felt uneasy during a call, they would not try to fix it alone. They would call the office and ask for advice or, if needed, ask for a wellness check. The next morning, the sheriff held a short public briefing in the lobby. He wanted everyone to hear the same words. Some reporters showed up along with a few grocers, a teacher, the church secretary, and 2 seniors from the community center. The sheriff spoke plainly. He said, "We have 2 problems that meet in the same homes. One is lack of food, the other is loneliness. We cannot solve them alone. We can solve them as neighbors." He explained the new Lonely No More network. He introduced Mara, not as a person in need, but as the volunteer who had already built a strong list and a kind method. He made one point very clear. No one traded anything for help. The sheriff's office did not hand out food. It connected people to the food bank, the churches, and the grocers who offered help. In return, the town got a volunteer network that made daily calls and reported early signs of need. It was not a barter. It was shared care. A few hard questions came from the small crowd. What about privacy? What if a volunteer makes a mistake? What if people try to get food without joining the calls? The sheriff and Renee answered each one with simple rules. Volunteers would keep all personal details private. They would not give medical advice. They would follow the 1-page guide, and they would call the office when unsure. The food effort would continue through the food bank and local partners, not through the sheriff's desk. No one would be forced to join anything. People could receive help as before. The new piece was a phone call that came with kindness and care. By the end of the briefing, the mood had shifted. The grocers said they would set aside boxes every Friday morning. The food bank announced a same-day shelf for urgent needs, and a volunteer promised to keep it stocked with whatever came in. The teacher said she would ask the high school honor club to join the call network, making friendly afternoon calls after classes. The 2 seniors from the community center raised their hands and said they would love to be callers too. They knew what questions felt kind and what questions felt nosy, and they would train others in that gentle art. The first week moved with a quiet energy. Mara picked up the grocery boxes for her family that day, but she also started the volunteer calls the very next morning. She trained her 3 friends at her kitchen table with the guide and the log the liaison had prepared. They took notes, practiced how to open a call, and practiced how to listen to silence. On the first day, the 4 of them reached 20 people. They logged small wins. Mr. L laughed at a story about a bird. Ms. D asked for help changing a light bulb. Mrs. K says the heater is making a noise. When a log showed worry, like the heater noise, the liaison sent a community handyman who volunteered to check it. It was a loose network, but it was strong in the way that hand-woven things are strong. Midweek, the county supervisor visited the sheriff. The supervisor had heard good feedback but still felt uneasy about optics. The sheriff did not get defensive. He showed the guide, the log, the clinic's checklist, and the clear line that kept food help with the food bank and partners. He showed the red folder used for urgent reports. He showed how the calls cut down on non-urgent welfare checks because the volunteers handled the small check-ins with care. The supervisor took a slow breath and said, "I see it. Keep it steady. Keep it clean." And that was that. The second week, the high school club made their first calls after a short training with Renee and a friendly senior from the community center. The teens were shy at first, but they learned to smile while speaking because you could hear a smile over the phone.